So hello, it's the middle of August 2021 and I've just finished my latest little project, which is to build a triple booting laptop, which is what you see in front of you. In fact, it's actually driving a large 40-inch 4K display, and that's to be explained. So in the normal course of a day, I principally work from a large workstation. But this large workstation is quite power hungry. It takes about 600 or 700 watts, some of which is the screens, by the way. And the other thing is it takes what seeming like a seeming eternity to switch on. Now, although we are living in a smart home and I can switch it on whilst lying in the bed, I don't always remember, and it takes about 10 minutes to fully start up. So the plan was to use the humble laptop which you see in front of you, which is a 5-year-old plus Toshiab Portege laptop, configure that with enough of an infrastructure to be able to use, and being as it's a laptop and can suspend and resume within a few seconds, the idea would be to use that laptop for daily work when the workstation was not alive. But there's one other very important thing, which is that this laptop, being as it's very old, has a passmark speed rating of something like 2,500. And to give you an indication, my partner's Apple MacBook is about 13,000. So her MacBook is running at something like 4 or 5 times the speed of mine, literally 400 or 500% faster, which I find quite intolerable. So I've ordered a new laptop, but that won't arrive for 6 or 7 weeks. And I did want to experiment on what I think would be the recommended configuration for the new laptop on this laptop. So I bought a new SATA drive, which is installed, a 256GB drive, which you see there in Disk Manager. And I've tested out a 3 operating system secure bit boot configuration, which is what I'm going to discuss today. So the essence is, this is a 5-year-old plus laptop. It's creaking along with a 4th gen i5. It's got a brand new 256GB SATA drive in there. We now have 3 operating systems, and you're looking at Windows 11. So in a previous diary entry, you'll see the way that you can go to a third-party website. That website downloads, pre-generates a script actually, which pulls from Microsoft all the files necessary to generate a .iso file. So Microsoft at the time of making this video doesn't have the ability to download the .iso, but you can generate a Windows 11 .iso using a script which is automatically generated. So for details of that in this post, I will make a link, of course, to my previous post where you can see how to do that. Anyway, with that .iso you can install by putting it onto your favourite USB key with something like Rufus, Windows 11, and that's what's being done here. So these are the build notes for this build as to what to look out for and what might catch you out. Let's look at the actual disk layout. You see that the first operating system I installed was Windows 11, and that created an EFI partition which wasn't at 1.07 GB, come to that in a second. It then put down the Windows 11 partition, and it also created a Windows recovery partition here. The next partition here is a Linux swap partition, and that gets installed when you install your first Linux operating system. So the first Linux operating system was Ubuntu, which was Elementary version 6, which is sitting here, and this is Ubuntu 21. Now this used to be Elementary 6 Beta, but it's now full Elementary version 6 because that's just gone gold. So I wanted to show you the partition layout. Now, hilariously, when I started to install Elementary, it said that this partition, the EFI partition, was not actually big enough. I couldn't quite believe it, but it said, oh no, I need a much larger one. So I had to boot this system using a tool. I think I used gparted and or the Windows Mini Disk Partition Manager, and I had to move all these other partitions out the way. So I already had a swap partition, I already had this partition, I had to like move 3 or 4 partitions. I think I moved them to the right by 1 gigabyte, believe it or not. So then there was a space here, and then I again in this partition manager, I managed to extend the EFI partition. Now that's when Elementary OS version 6 was in beta 2. I have no idea if that's still a limitation or gotcha, but Elementary made me create a massive EFI partition, so that's why that partition is as large as it is. Okay, so just a few notes on the Windows 11 build. Everything's working absolutely fine. Windows is activated, even though I don't recall having put in a key. I actually I custom made the .iso file, which is quite a time-consuming process on my more than 40 plus processor workstation. It had to compress a number of files and put them into a .iso, and that took the best part of an hour. So on a less powerful workstation, I'm guessing more than an hour. Anyway, that's how I made it. I would say that the tools I would normally use to put a .iso onto a USB stick are the Rufus program. There's also the Ventoy program and the Easy to Boot program. So the Ventoy and Easy to Boot program are kind of next gen installer programs, in that you create a USB key and then you simply, in a separate partition on the USB key, drag and drop, or you copy the .iso file into a file system. That's all you do, you don't unpack it or anything. And either Ventoy or Easy to Boot allows you, when you boot from that key, to use the ISO as is. So that's a really big advance for systems installers. Again, those two programs are Easy to Boot and Ventoy. Okay, keep sipping my coffee. So the next thing I'm going to show you is the fact that this is a secure boot system. So Windows X, let's do a full shutdown of this baby. Again, don't forget this is a, I think it's a Gen 4 i5 processor, so it's pretty slow. So this is a Toshiba laptop, power it on. Really press the key, power on, hold F2. It's too slow, so that's the grub menu, which we'll talk about later. Let's power it off. Okay. Power on, F2, hold F2 button. Okay, we're in the setup utility for Toshiba. Now, the Toshiba laptop seems to require F2 to go into the setup BIOS menu and F12 to get to a one-off boot menu, which you'll need to boot from the USB key, unless you've changed the boot order, which has some problems, which I'm going to tell you about now. So the trick, or the key thing to remember when you're installing these operating systems, is that you have to have Secure Boot disabled. And the reason for that is that when you make your USB key, you'll find that the files on your USB key are not signed. And so when the system tries to boot from the key, it says, wait a minute, I can't boot from this key because it's not secure. So the only way to install the operating systems today would be to switch off Secure Boot, install the operating systems, and then come back into the BIOS and switch back on Secure Boot. And that's completely independent from Trusted Platform, TPM, so you can leave that on at all times. There's a bug in the Toshiba BIOS in that sometimes I get weird errors, and I can't boot any operating system, and the only way to get around that is to press the Setup Defaults And I've done it so many times that I used to customise the BIOS to do all sorts of clever things, but because I keep on having to go back to set up defaults in order to boot the computer at all, I tend to leave it at setup defaults. So for example, there's an option so that when you open the lid of the laptop, it will automatically start up. And whilst I love that option, I've set it so many times because then I've had to reset it with setup defaults that at the moment it's switched off. It's purely on defaults, setup defaults with secure boot switched on. Okay, so again, to install these operating systems, you need to switch off secure boot, you need to create your bootable USB key, you need to install the operating system. In the case of elementary and Ubuntu, I had to move the EFI partition. I had to enlarge the EFI partition, which was complete and utter pain in the what's-it. Right, so we're going to close this, and we'll then get to the grub menu. So, should be booting. Right, so if you install Windows first, Windows will install Boot Manager in a separate partition. But if you install Linux, Linux will use grub too. So in the bootable area for this hard drive is installed grub, and grub will refer to the Windows Boot Manager, or it will refer to other grub bootable elements. So the installation was Windows 11 first, followed by elementary, followed by Ubuntu. And this ends up in that menu because the last installed Linux gets the top place on the menu, so that's why Ubuntu is first on the menu. So we're going to boot Ubuntu. So you see we're up and running. We're running a multi-screen display, and I'm going to explain why. So as I said before, we wanted this to be a quick way to start up a productive working environment, and by that I mean a large screen environment, so this tiny 13.3-inch display isn't going to be good enough. So I've installed something called -2 panel, I think it's called, and that replaces the vertical UI application launch bar that would normally be on Ubuntu 21, or for some time Ubuntu, on the left-hand edge of the window, but only on the primary display and not the secondary display, because -2 panel can have it on all displays. So you'll see I've moved it to the horizontal base, a la Windows if you like, and I've also chosen to install my favourite applications, which are Chrome browser, the VLC media player, and obviously Firefox. So the big three implications for me are installed. I don't plan to show you much more except to say, can I show you the display settings? Yeah, so I can show you display settings showing that this window, the laptop screen is at the bottom and the 4K 40-inch screen is above that. So you can drag a window, stop VLC. Come on, demo, don't let me down. Okay, here's a window. So here's a window. This is at the bottom of the screen. Okay, just very slow. So as you can see, you can drag window from the bottom screen straight through to the top screen. Okay, that's Ubuntu. Let's shut this baby down. Obviously the reboot key, which would have been on the top, is now here. So we can do a restart. Some coffee. and finally we'll show you elementary. Now, I had a bit of trouble with elementary. I have used it in the past and I hadn't noticed this situation, obviously not used it enough, but what I noticed was, do you know what, I've been pressing the wrong key. I was pressing the right hand arrow, not the down arrow, so now Grub has loaded Ubuntu. So right, this is, just bear with me while I waffle on a little bit longer, sorry. Right to Ubuntu. So I've had a little bit of an awkward situation with elementary. The reason to use elementary is it's a beautiful looking operating system interface. But of course it's based on Debian, so it's no better than Ubuntu at the lowest level, but it looks nice. I kind of installed it in case I get kind of like Mac fanboys going, oh, it's not as nice looking as Mac OS. I go to boot elementary and go, okay, you want it to look like this then, do you? So it is a beautiful looking operating system, but I have noticed that if you go into the App Store, everything seems to cost money, which since I'm trying to do this build on a very low cost basis, having saved up from the laptop, that wasn't something I was interested in pursuing. I just want to show you that we'll boot up and so we've started up elementary version 6 and you see we've got the large 2 screen layout, and it took a bit of a while, but it has been installed. VLC, we've got a full Firefox, full Google Chrome, and obviously the command line. So the basics to me are installed. Everything over and above that is nice to have, but obviously using the Linux command line, basically everything's possible, and you need to do the Googling if it's not immediately obvious whatever is possible as to how to do it. So there you have it. We have 3 operating systems on this £200 laptop. It's a good testing platform to test out secure boot. There are a number of programs that allow you to save the Grub to configuration, which I've started to do, and there's some Grub rescue tools I think that I've also installed, so that if any one of these 3 operating systems messes with the Grub configuration files, I can kind of recover them or restore them. So I'd advise doing that. So, but back to the main plot, which is this £200 laptop is now secure booting the 3 operating systems that I've chosen. It's a good test bed to get yourself operating with Windows 11. It's also a very fast way to get working because I don't have to wait for my main workstation to start up, and it has to check hundreds of gigabytes of memory and terabytes of disk. And that takes a long time. So this is the sort of fast version. I need to make a quick edit to something, I can start my laptop, and in the future I'll be able to start a faster laptop. Okay, Dari, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you. Bye.